Hello, I'm Marty Eichelberger. I'm the Director of the Burns Service at Children's National Medical Center, and I'm a professor of surgery at this great institution. Today, you're coming on the website to find out something about burns. What I'd like to tell you is that it's one of the most devastating injuries that a child can sustain. One of the problems that we have is most people think that it's not going to happen to them. The injuries that we see are clearly preventable, and there are some steps that you can take to make sure that these children are kept out of harm's way. Two major things happen. One is the kids are burned from scalds. Usually it's a liquid that hurts these kids. And on the other side, it's generally something that has to do with fire. Occasionally these children also have contact where they can actually put their hand up against something hot, like your iron that you use for your clothing every day. So you have water that causes a significant burn, all the way to a fire that really gives you the worst and the deepest burns that we see. One of the things that you can do to make sure that these kids are kept out of harm's way is to realize that kids will explore the entire environment. They will get into everything, and where you think they won't go, they will go. First of all is to keep them away from coffee. It's very easy for a newborn mother, a new mother, to grab their newborn, be drinking coffee, and unfortunately somebody hit their hand and burn the baby at the same time. Very common thing that happens. The other is tea. Taking children into a place where you're going to have a good evening. Unfortunately, the hot tea there is running at 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which can burn a child instantaneously. The thickness of the skin of a child is much thinner than yours and mine. We can tolerate a lot of warmth to our skin that a child cannot. The other thing that you want to make sure is that when your child is at home, you don't allow that child to be in the kitchen, or you don't allow him to be in the bathroom. Those are two areas where hot water exists. Especially in the bathroom, when you leave that child alone inside of a tub, it's very easy to hit the instant hot, and that child in a very few seconds will sustain a very deep dermal burn. In the kitchen, I probably don't even have to tell you the number of things that are in that kitchen that are at risk for your child. Not only the hot water, but there's grease, there's contact to the flame, there is also the potential for explosion in the kitchen itself. And the kids like to be there because they like to play. So one of the things that you can do is just have a barrier between your kitchen and your living room or their play areas, just to keep the kids out of that space. That's one thing that you can do. The second is, don't keep water too hot. In the bathroom especially, you ought to be setting your temperatures around 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But I don't know, many of you have taken a shower with 120 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's not very hot. So most people will go and actually increase that to 140 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, where now you can burn the skin of a child. So there's always a balance that we have to strike between what's best for the child and what's best for us as adults. The other thing that you can do is to make sure that you actually test the water in a tub to make sure that you're not putting your child into a hot tub that's beyond their capacity to tolerate that. So supervision is an important part of it, but there are a lot of things that you can do to make sure that the water that you're actually having come into your tub is controlled. You can actually go and buy devices that will actually control the temperature coming out of the spigot into the tub. So that's another thing that you can do, because you want to do things that you don't have to actively take an action. You want to be able to make it so that the water stays at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, doesn't exceed that temperature. Those are simple things that you don't have to think about. The thinking about it is, another example, is you leave your child at home with a 7 or 8 year old, and they're hungry at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you give them oodles and noodles. Oodles and noodles are one of the most dangerous things that kids have, because as soon as they take that top off the oodles and noodles, the heat and the steam explodes, and then it goes all over these kids, especially the smaller ones, because the smaller ones are looking up, trying to get this good soup. Unfortunately, they get burned. So it's something, again, don't let the kids have that kind of access. The other part of it that's extremely important is, that every house should have a smoke detector. The smoke detector, we know that if you have one in your house, the chances of your child dying go down almost 95%. So that a child and you can get out of a burning house because that smoke detector is going to give you enough time to get out. That's, of course, if you have an escape plan that you've actually talked about with your children and your loved ones that live with you. And you hear it all the time in the national news that a series of 5 or 6 kids died in a fire. That's totally unacceptable. That does not have to happen. All you need is that one smoke detector that's functional in your home that you need to check every month to make sure you can save a child's life. And the other is, while you've got the smoke detector there, you ought to have a carbon monoxide detector. Those are very inexpensive. They cost maybe $30, and you can place that in your home to make sure that you're not going to be asleep and end up dying because of carbon monoxide. These are simple steps that each of us can take to make sure that kids are kept out of harm's way. The other is grease. Grease is an area where if you're in the kitchen and you're making a nice chicken dinner, one of the things that happens is that the chicken generates grease, and the kids will go to that stove, grab that pot, and pull it down on themselves. So it's very important to turn the handles of these pots away from the children, and especially, as I said before, you don't want that child in that living room at any time, ever. And you especially don't want them around when you're drinking coffee. Another risk children have is during the 4th of July, when they have access to fireworks. Everybody talks about it, but nobody takes it seriously. And unfortunately, this past year, for the 2 weeks around the 4th of July, we had some devastating injuries to children because they were playing with sparklers and they were playing with smoke, with firecrackers. Unfortunately, their clothing caught fire, and now these kids have devastating burns for the rest of their lives. The problem with burns is that once it happens, there's no way back. We don't have the good medicine to really solve this problem. The only thing that really works is prevention. Because once they get burned, you and I will feel, unfortunately, very guilty about it, and knowing that there was something that we really could have done. And we have to think about this before these kinds of situations really occur. So fireworks and the 4th of July are a serious problem. The other part of it is the fact that kids, especially during the summer, are around grills, and they're around areas of barbecuing is being done. And unfortunately, the way with these new grills is a lot of it is natural gas. And if you let that gas run for a little period of time, and then you try to light your grill, it explodes. Unfortunately, this past summer, we've had 2 children that have sustained significant burns while their parents were grilling. They came up, they're 3 years old, they were standing right next to the grill, and it exploded on ignition. So again, this is something that's very preventable, and you keep saying to yourself, what could I have done? Well, this is what you could do, is to keep the kids out of that particular area. The grill itself can also create contact burns, because the first thing a toddler, a youngster who's 18 months to about 3 years of age, first thing they want to do is put their hand on it, or they want to lean on it. Very risky, because these kids then will burn their hands or their face, and unfortunately they'll be scarred for the rest of their lives. The others around campfires. Many of you like to go out and spend time in campfires. The first thing that most people do is they cover the embers with dirt or grass, and then the kids walk across it. And it's a very common injury that we see with kids that are Boy Scouts, young girls that are Girl Scouts. These kinds of preventive measures can be taken. And we can't forget about just the sunburn that these kids are exposed to, and most of these kids should be using SPF of 30 or greater. So the things that you can do in summary is to make sure that your kids stay away from areas where there's hot liquid. The next thing is to make sure that kids are in an environment where the temperature is set at 120 degrees, so that all of your heaters, the heaters that warm up your water in your home, are set at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep them away and out of the kitchen or the bathroom. And when you take the children in to get a bath, you have to check the water to make sure that that water is tempered enough so that it's not going to burn their thin skin. To make sure that they stay away from fireworks. When you're grilling, that you don't turn those grills on without making sure the kids are totally out of the area, because the potential for an explosion is very high. And then finally, I think we've got to make sure that we have smoke detectors in everybody's home, and that they're checked every month. And this will, in and of itself, just the smoke detector will reduce the mortality for kids in burns in fires by almost 95%. So I really encourage you to take the simple steps. You can actually go to childrensnational.org, and there will be some tips for you at that point that you can actually download and go through your home and create a safe zone for your child to make sure that they live in a safe environment at the same time you allow them to play actively. So we don't want them to be put in a corner with no activity, but you as a parent can do a lot to make sure that these children are safe and out of harm's way. I look forward to working with you and keeping your child out of Children's National Medical Center. Thank you for visiting childrensnational.org.